Brodsky, and I'm an associate professor of practice at the University Center for Assessment, Teaching, and Technology. And this is my father, Dan Brodsky, who at the time of this recording is 86 years old, and he is in late stage Lewy body dementia. I'm going to be talking about my perspective of this disease from the perspective of a family member, specifically his daughter. And so you're going to hear me say a couple of things that may not be shared by professionals in the field. For example, the prevalence of the different types of dementia. So Alzheimer's, we know, is the largest one. And when it began with my father, I kind of thought dementia and Alzheimer's was synonymous. I didn't realize it was an umbrella term. And Lewy body has much fewer cases than Alzheimer's, but really, to a family member, prevalence doesn't matter. There's stages. And when he was first showing signs and I started trying to do research and reach out, I found these 7 stages. And they weren't particularly helpful because as his daughter, I just wanted to know what was happening. I wanted someone to tell me what was going to happen and how soon it was going to happen. I wanted a map. And if there's one thing I can say about dementia, there is no map. But here is what it looks like. So when we think about stages of dementia, these other stages not really helping a family member much, but now thinking about how does that manifest? What kinds of things might we expect? And getting that diagnosis of Lewy body, we wished we would have had it sooner. It would have explained so many things that were going on. He didn't seem like a person with Alzheimer's. We knew people who had Alzheimer's. What was happening with my father was so different than what we had seen before. So we know it's a progression, and so we noticed right away, he was, right in the beginning, he was hoarding glasses. I found all of those in just his office. We laughed it off at the time. We kind of thought he was just aging. But that was some of the beginning signs that something in his reasoning and his logic was not working. My father was an architect. He was logical to a fault. So when he started not being able to reason or to be able to have rational thinking, it was stunning because it was so different than who he was. That next picture, he's got that neck brace on. He was in a car accident. He crashed his car as a result of dementia. Fortunately, no one was badly hurt. Sort of moving on down the moderate range, he wasn't able to write. His letters got small. They didn't make any sense. And as he progressed further and further along, his ability to care for himself waned. So there are different forms of Lewy body, and we know that there's a cognitive part of it, there's a movement disorder, and there's a neuropsychiatric component. And again, kind of the same way I was saying before, as a family member, it's, some people do this, some people do that, and only it's number 3, a small group present with hallucinations and behavioral issues. Again, that was the world we were living in. It didn't matter that it was just a small group. That was my dad. So in thinking about some of those forms and how the disease manifests, sometimes it looks like a cognitive disorder of some sort. So, for example, memory, executive functioning, judging distances, attention, all kinds of things that show up, and just the overall changes of his confusion, his mood, his behavior. Language and numbers were very much impacted. Verbally, he maintained a lot of language. Numerically, everything fell away. That was one of the first skill sets that he completely lost. Cognitive fluctuations. We still see my father go in and out of alert states and sleepy states, and it can happen throughout the day. He certainly has had issues with being up at night. But this video that I'm about to show you really shows some of those conditions of him being sort of staring into space, seeming groggy, disorganized, unclear, illogical. You're going to see them all. So let's take a look and listen.
That breeze sure feels good.
What are you having?
I'm just having a Werther's.
Oh, Werther's.
You open it this way, honey. You want the fridge open?
This is so confusing. Doors here. It's everywhere. There's a door. Okay. By the way, this stuff eventually needs to be wiped, every so often.
Okay.
And let's see what else.
Did you want me to cut some strawberries for you? Blueberries?
No, this thing was chucked full of 4 of the ice cream. So I got rid of all 4.
But that's a refrigerator. This is your freezer.
Oh, that thing's got me every time.
Yeah.
How do they expect you to stay sane?
How do they expect you to stay sane? So that was a typical way that my dad would frame things that didn't make sense to him. And he would often say, oh, they flipped the doors on the refrigerator and the freezer. It was fine, but now they flipped it, and you don't know what you're talking about when you say that can't happen. And that voice that you heard was one of his just best caregivers of all time. She was so patient and understanding. So there's also a component of a movement disorder that can be related to Parkinson's. And my father's brother does have Parkinson's and now has Parkinson's dementia. So in thinking about movement disorder, back in August of 2021, I went to visit my dad at a different place that he was living. And I saw him shuffling for the first time and short steps and kind of hunched over. His physical decline was really dramatic to me. Let's take a look. And 6 months later, he has declined much more. And this next video I'm going to show you, he used to be an avid keyboardist, very, very talented musically. I can plunk out a song. I'm not not talented musically, but I can plunk out a song. He can hear it, and then he can play it. But at the beginning of this clip, you're going to hear him ask me a nonsensical question, which is very common for him. And you'll hear me reply just in a way that I thought might make sense to him.
Triple surgery is a lot bigger, right?
Well, triple surgery is bigger than single surgery.
Yeah.
Bigger than double surgery. But let's see, how does that song go? Yeah, triple surgery, bigger than double surgery. And that's the thing, you got to just roll with it. So the neuropsychiatric symptoms, those have been the hardest and they're very distinct traits with Lewy body dementia. And so beginning with paranoia, he became convinced that people were stealing things from him. He thought one of his caregivers was stealing the dog food and selling it on the black market for dog food. And there was just no convincing him otherwise. He had the fixed false beliefs that conflicted with reality. He decided one day that his wife of 30 years was a terrible wife, and he wrote her horrible letters, and he eventually divorced her. We couldn't stop it. He wasn't diagnosed. I could do a whole talk just on the legal system dealing with family members and advocating for people with dementia. But he divorced her, and he was absolutely convinced, regardless of what we did, that she was a terrible wife and that she no longer cared for him. Can't let go of certain convictions. So despite contrary evidence, a person in a delusional state can't let go of those convictions. And that was him to a T. I used to say he's like a rabid dog with a bone. And I just thought he was being really stubborn. I didn't have the framework to understand that everything he was doing and saying was delusional. So he was hoarding things, and we would take photos with him. We'd say, "Let's go take a photo, Dad, of the syrup. You won't, then when we get to the store, you'll know what you need." Okay, we did that. Then we'd get to the store, and he would insist. We didn't know what we were talking about. We didn't know. He knew better. He was going to buy the syrup. Little did we know that toilet paper was going to come in handy in about a year after that photo was taken. Delusions, reinforced by the misinterpretation of events, which happened so often. This was an example. He had not paid one of his caregivers. She had asked him, sent him an invoice. He just refused and refused to pay her, which was happening quite a bit. And then he'd overpay other people. And so she sent him this email saying if he doesn't pay, then she's going to proceed accordingly, which of course means she's going to take him to court. But he read that and thought, she's going to come over. She's going to try and kill me. She's going to rob me. He wrote down the police word a couple times. I'm not sure what any of those other numbers are. That was pretty typical for his writing at that time. And we just could not convince him otherwise. But he was certain that she was coming in, and then anything that was misplaced, she's been going through my bills. She's been going through my papers. She's touched all my clothing in the middle of the night. He believed all of that to be true. The level of paranoia that goes along with that, with those beliefs that despite reason or logic, one day he showed the caregiver a pair of his underwear and it had feces in it. And what he told her was that somebody had snuck in and put this horrible smell on that. He couldn't recognize that the horrible smell was feces. He couldn't recognize that those were his underpants or that he might have had anything to do with it. Instead, he was convinced someone had broken in and done this horrible thing. And so this is a photo of him walking around his yard trying to find out where they might have broken in. And what he ultimately said was, well, what's such a shame is that the police won't do anything about it. They probably can't get fingerprints off of this, and this being what was his underwear. And hallucinations. So where we are right now, my dad hallucinates most of the time. It's not stressful. He points to things that aren't there. He talks about things that aren't there. And as long as it's not causing him any agitation or distress, who cares? It doesn't matter. But this particular recording that I'm going to play for you was 48 hours after I moved him to Tucson, finally got him here, and he had a full-blown hallucination that I was able to record. So what he's going to describe right now actually didn't happen.
Tell us we've got a real fiasco here. You've got to get over here with all the paperwork you have. They've rented the half of the apartment to somebody, and they've locked me out. So I don't have a two-bedroom. I have a one-bedroom. And I can't get my stuff out of the two-bedroom. So you've got to get over here to help me straighten it out. We've got to move.
So he was convinced that there was a man in his apartment, that the man had moved into one of the bedrooms, and that somehow they had kicked him out and he was standing outside of his apartment, none of which was true. But that was our first sort of documented full-blown hallucination. So I'm going to end this just on a happy note, and that is that all the things I just described and all the things that I just showed are not my father. It is like someone moved in the middle of the night and stole him away. And I think a lot about, are we still a person if we don't have memories? Are we a person if we have no past that we can draw on? And so whereas I recognize that my father has a disease, and it's a disease that he will ultimately pass away from, probably within the next year, this is the father I will remember. I will have images from his disease. I will talk about his disease. But what I know is that he is not his disease.